All right, last but not least, the last 10 of this tutorial, the last block. Using export to share a code block. All right, so we've done this a bunch. So here's a function called add, and we export add. No parentheses or anything inside of an object. If you export a variable or function, you can export a variable or function. So this is a function, a variable that stores a function. That's exactly what this is. This is a variable, const add, that stores a function, and then you export that variable. One of them stored a variable add that takes two numbers and returns their sum. You want to use this function in different JavaScript files. You need to first export it. When you export a variable or function, you can import it to another file without having to rewrite the code. You can export multiple things by comma separating like that. So we're going to, there are two string related functions, export both of them using the method of your choice. Import allows you to choose which part of a file or module to load. The example exported add. Here's how you can import add. Here, import will find add in the math.js import function. Import is just that function that you use, and ignore the rest. The / tells the import to look in the same folder. The relative path and extension.js are required when using import this way. You can import more than one. Add the appropriate import statement. Uppercase. Okay, import everything as, suppose you have a file you wish to import all of its contents. Import as syntax, import my math module. The above import statement will create an object called my math module. This is just a variable name. You can name it anything. The object will contain all the exports, so you can access its functions, add, subtract, string functions. Use import star to import everything to an object name string functions. Import star as string functions. Create an export fallback with an export default. In the export lesson, you learned about the syntax to refer to a named export. This allows you to make multiple functions and variables available for use in other files. There's another export syntax you need to know, known as export default. Usually the syntax, you will use this syntax if only one value is being exported from a file. It is also used to create a fallback for a file or module. Here we're exporting default function, export default function. The first is a named function, the second one is an anonymous function. So export default is used to declare a fallback. You can only have one, being a default. Additionally, you cannot use export default with var let or const. The following function should be the fallback for the module. In the last challenge, you learned about the export default. To import a default, you need to use a different import syntax. Here, the following example of add the syntax differs in one key place. The imported value add is not surrounded with curlies. Add here is simply a variable name for whatever the default export is. You can use any name. So yeah, there's no curlies there. In the following code, import export the default export. So we're going to say import, give the import name subtract, promise. A promise is exactly what it sounds like. You use it to make a promise to do something, usually asynchronously. When the task is complete, you either fulfill or fail to do so. Like a function that promises to return data from a database. A promise is a constructor function, so you need to use the new keyword to create one. It takes a function as its argument with two parameters. Resolve and reject. Here's the anonymous function. Arrow syntax. These methods are used to determine the outcome of the promise. The syntax looks like this. Create a new promise. Const make server requests. Promise. Arrow, curlies, pass in a function with resolve and reject parameters to the constructor. Make server request. You should receive a function with resolved and request. Promise. Promise has three states: pending, fulfilled, or rejected. Not done yet. Fulfilled means yep. Rejected means nope. The promise you created in the last challenge is forever stuck in the pending state because you did not add a way to complete the promise. The resolve and reject parameters are given to the promised argument to do this. Resolve is used when you want your promise to succeed. Reject is used when you want it to fail. There are methods. These are methods that take an argument as seen below. If condition, resolve, otherwise reject. Oh yeah. The resolve method takes an argument. The reject method takes an argument. The example uses strings for the argument of these functions, but it can be anything. Often it might be an object that you want to use data from and put otherwhere on the website. Make a promise, handle success and failure. If response from server is true, call the resolve method. Successfully passed resolve, we got the data. Data not received. I don't think they want the periods on that. Promises are most useful when you have a process that takes an unknown amount of time in your code, something asynchronous, often a server request. When you make a server request that takes an amount of time after it completes, you usually want to do something in response from the server. This can be achieved by using the then method. The then method executed immediately after your promise is fulfilled with resolve. Here's an example. My promise then result comes from the argument given to the resolve method. Add the then method to your promise. Use the result as a parameter of its callback function and log the result. So here's my promise. Response server is set to true to represent successful response from the server. So here's my promise. I'm going to make server request dot then use the result as the parameter as callback function and log the console log. So we make a promise, and then if it's successful, we log the results. And handle catch. So catch is a method when your promise has been rejected. It is executed immediately after a promise reject method is called. Here's the syntax. Add a catch method to your promise. Use the error parameter. So there's the end of the then dot catch error. And we are done. Regular expressions next, to be continued.